Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Osseo gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Osseo's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Osseo. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. Hey folks, I want to take a minute to give you a heads up about Tethered's latest gear. If you're serious about staying mobile in the woods, you've got to check this stuff out. Now, I've been using their Ultra Lock saddle, and now the SD saddle is available. And let me tell you, this thing is dialed. It's ultra light, super adjustable, and most importantly, it's comfortable. You're not going to be shifting around up in the tree wondering if your legs are going to fall asleep. Pair that with the Predator V platform, which is stable, lightweight, and has an angled front edge for comfort. This thing will give you plenty of room for those critical moments when you need to make a move on a deer. And if you're like me and you spend long hours in the tree, you'll appreciate the new Predator CFX platform. Carbon fiber construction that keeps it light, but tough enough to handle whatever you throw at it. This is the kind of gear that makes a difference when you're out there all day. And listen, if you're always juggling your gear like I am, Tethered's got you covered with the Universal Platform Pack. More rigid to make getting your platform in and out easier, and 2 sizes to fit the smaller and larger platforms. Whether you're hunting public land or heading to your favorite spot on the back 40, this setup makes carrying your platform so much easier. So if you're serious about getting in the game this season and hunting smarter, check out Tethered at tethered.com. Their gear will keep you lighter, quieter, and up in the tree longer, which, as we all know, is where the magic happens. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I got my buddy on, Mr. Cody Redinger. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on. As you can see here, I got the whitetail vagabond, whitetail homeless guy motif going on here.
I know it. I know it all too well. Yeah. Whatever gets you by.
That's it, man. I'm, for those who are not watching and just listening, I'm sitting in my truck because I've been out hunting, since mid last week and all through this coming week, and Starlink just doesn't work as well in the spot that I've been camping. And so I had to kind of drive and find some cell service because I didn't want to have to reschedule this. And so, truck studio it is. The Ram covers all bases.
Yeah, it's nice having a vehicle that, in your case, a trailer too, that you can just have all your necessities live out of and do what you got to do for the next couple of weeks, because it really just comes down to what the deer want to do. So you got to be there. So
that's it, man. That's the game I've been playing. I did a podcast, I think last week with, that'll be coming out as you and I were talking, with my buddy Jacob Sklenner. And we were talking about just chasing a specific deer in the rut. We talked a little bit about just, especially if you're chasing a specific deer, and we're going to get into that with you, how much kind of time you have to kind of put into it, not just passing other deer that maybe you would shoot, but it's, they don't want to necessarily do it on your time all the time. And so you kind of have to make yourself as available as possible, especially when you're talking mountain deer, right, man? Because it's not like, it's not like you're in a place that has a lot of structure where it's like, hey, he's going to hit this funnel or this pinch every 2 or 3 days. You just time it up. It doesn't necessarily work that way.
Yeah. You might get, one shot to get on this deer that you want to get on. But, you definitely have to go by their time. And that's a big thing that, I've learned over the years is each one of these deer, they have their own personality, and you gotta be their best friend, right? You gotta know them. You gotta know what they want to do, when they want to do it. And, it's good. Yeah.
They're, I'm fingers crossed that I haven't missed the one opportunity at the deer that I've been chasing. I snagged some. Yesterday I did a quick walkabout because I was in a spot I hunted for like 2 days and felt real good about it. Had some good action. Then yesterday it just kind of died, and I don't know. You ever get that feeling? I'm sure you have, where you're sitting and you're like, I know I'm in a good spot. I just don't know if it's good right now. Like I feel like it was good. Mm-hmm. I saw some really good stuff like 2 days ago, and then it just kind of dried up, and I feel like the action has just kind of moved. We're also kind of getting into the lockdown phase too, and so I know that that's kind of happening too. But you get that spidey sense of like, in the rain coming in today, I was like, you know what? I feel like I just need to go check cameras and like figure out where the action is and make a move.
And that I've utilized that many times in October. I mean, before cell cameras, I would take any chance I got rain wise, and I'd run the mountains. I'd end up running probably like 20, 25 miles in a day,
Wow.
just no, literally like running, like put on my trail shoes and run. It's because at that time, I wasn't running nearly as many trail cameras as I am today, but still, I mean, you're looking at like 40 trail cameras and
Hmm.
trying to get all of them in a day, just trying to see, okay, where do I got to go next?
Yeah.
Where are they at now? But
Yeah. Yeah. I think the saving grace for me with that is I run quite a few, but the area that I'm hunting, it's like I have a handful of them and I kind of know the area and I know, you know, I know where I think I can kill the deer I'm trying to kill, and so it's like I'm kind of focused on those handful
yep,
of
yep,
areas like in the intel related to that. And I got two good pieces
yeah.
of intel yesterday. One, it's always good to get intel that you know that he's alive. So
Well,
that's
sure,
always
yeah,
good, you know.
definitely.
And then I've been playing, um, trying to find this guy's sign, and it's been really really hard because, and I don't know if you experience this where you're at. I know you and Hep aren't, or Aaron Hepler don't live too awful far away
Hmm.
from one another.
Yeah, I just
And,
met him this past year. Him and a few other guys, they're actually really close. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, Hep's a good guy. And I've been trying to figure out, like I was trying to find this buck sign, but he has some interesting antler characteristics that you should be able to tell if he's laying something down, especially from like a rub perspective, right? Um, and couldn't find anything. And I'm sure you kind of run into this too, where it's like big deer don't necessarily always lay down big sign necessarily, so it can be deceiving. And this is a great case in point because the deer that I've been kind of chasing he's a big deer, and I got a trail camera video of him yesterday when I pulled it. And as he was walking away at the very end of the video, he got kind of slightly out of picture, but you could see him stop. I'm like, what is he stopping for? And then all of a sudden I can see him put his head down and hit a tree. Right. And I was
Hmm.
like, Yahtzee. I was like, I've been waiting to figure out what this guy's sign looks like. This deer's,
Those are the moments, the gotcha moments there. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, and like the rub is maybe 8 inches tall,
Hmm.
you know, but
Yep.
he has specific antler characteristics and you could tell that it was
Mm.
him. Right.
Hmm.
And so then as I was scouting the rest of the day yesterday, I was looking at every one of the rubs I kind of came across, and I found basically a rub line that he's laid down. Right now, whether that means a lot or not in November, may or may not be the key. But it was just nice to know now I kind of have like a thumbprint for him or a fingerprint of him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
you know,
good. Yeah.
yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I don't, you know, in the areas that I hunt, I when we're looking for like rubs and stuff like that, it's, you find these, big ones and um I don't pay too much attention to them just because everybody can see that and everybody's going to be
Mhm.
nearby. Everybody's going to hunt that. And you know, I definitely take those into account and more or less I'm trying to find where he was coming from when he did that. So direction of the rub is a big
Mhm.
thing for me and make sure that I take into account, okay, it's on this side of the tree and so that doesn't always, you know, play out because they can mingle around, but
Right.
I do try and look at direction and of that rub and also, as I'm getting into more areas, I don't necessarily see as many rubs, and I don't know why I don't know why that is. I don't know if sometimes I almost feel like these deer know, like they put out the
Mhm.
sign and like they know that other people, hunters, they're 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 the prey, right? And they're putting this out, and the areas that I hunt are very 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 pressured. And a lot of times, if I find something, it's very like it's not standoutish very much. It's very much in like the thick of things, and like I talk about how when I find so I might have an area and then 4 or 5 spots in that area, so maybe like a 200-acre area, and then break it down into like 10, 20 acres that specifically that I would hunt in my spots. And like usually within that, I can find maybe one scrape that I know like, okay, this is him, and he's establishing his, quote unquote dominance there, right? And it's usually around, the does. But the rubs are, most of them, when I see them, they're out in the open too. So like you have the smaller one, like I'll find like the little, uh, the ones that are broken off, that, the smaller ones that are broken off. But like when they're hitting like the big rubs and the big trees, they're usually out in the open. And I
Yeah.
see like a lot of other hunters focus on those. And I'm like, I would never hunt that, because one, that's also a big thing that I try to do, is like I'm thinking about, I want to be that deer, right? And like, why would I be out here during the daytime hitting that when everybody else can see it and there's no cover for me? So, I don't play too much into rubs, just because like even if I hang a cell camera there, it'll be stolen.
Right.
I try to back off from that and try to figure out, okay, where are they coming from? And, because most likely they're not, in those specific cases, they're not hitting those during the daylight.
Yeah. Yeah. That the rub that he made, like to me, was more of like it was a frustration. I call it a frustration, or like I'm getting ramped up rub. You know what I mean? It wasn't,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's where that camera is actually at a crossing that I've established from hanging the camera there before. And so I know that they like to cross there, and that's really why I hung it there. Right. And so that rub, to your point, to me, wasn't anything more than me giving me a thumbprint to say, okay, this is what his rubs look like. Right.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I also could see a tick mark up above where the main rub was. That's like a good 12 inches above it. That you can see where his G2
Okay.
would have been hitting. You know what I mean? To
Okay.
where it's like,
Yeah.
so that
That's
was like
big though. I
right.
mean,
That's the
trying
identifier. Yeah.
to identify that. Yeah, I know. I was listening to a podcast with Nathan Killen, and he was saying how he found droppings from the deer that he killed last year.
Last year. Yeah. Yeah.
And just stuff like that. I mean, basic, just it's just keeping your eyes open, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that you're just living in the moment there, and making sure you're bringing everything in and just taking it all in, and making sure that you're looking at those really fine details. I think
Yeah.
that's what separates a lot of people from being successful or not successful, is just those details of just the woodsmanship, and really, like I said, just being that deer.
Yeah. It's what I've kind of found, and I've been reciting this to myself as I'm sitting, right? Is like you start to wander off, and even when you're scouting, it's like you're walking from like, okay, I checked the camera and I'm going to walk this like ridge, or I'm going to walk this bowl or whatever. And as you're going, and you're not finding anything, and so your mind starts to drift about, well, maybe I should go check this area, right? And it might be still deer hunting. You might be, let me go check this other area, or it might even be something different. It might be, man, should I go home tonight, or should I not? Whatever it could be. And so
Yeah.
I've been reminding myself this phrase of just saying, be where your feet are. Be where your feet are. Just to remind myself to
I like that. Yeah.
stay focused on where I'm at. There's nothing better than where I am right now, is what I keep telling myself.
Not get complacent, not, making sure that you're, not complacent, and doing everything you can. And I like that. I'm going to remind myself of that also.
Yeah. It's, be where my feet are. I keep reminding myself of that, because, especially long sits in the rut and stuff like that, like we were saying earlier, you're either in the action or you're not in the action, right? It's like when you're in the action, man, life's good. When you're not, it feels like there's not a deer within 100 miles of you.
And it can go like that.
Yeah.
Like super quick.
Exactly.
But yeah.
But some of us don't have to wait for the rut like you, like to get it done in October, right? So
So this year was the first year I ever did something like this. But
yeah, I want to get into this buck. So let's just jump into it, right?
Yeah.
So I read the story that you posted on Instagram, so I have a little bit of familiarity with it. But I wanted to just kind of hear you kind of describe how everything how it all kind of shook
Yeah.
out. So when did you learn of this deer? Because I was surprised, you know, not surprised, but I'm kind of going not through exact same thing, but like a deer that I've known of for just a few years, right? And got to this year and I finally felt like I could hunt him. Like I knew of him the other years, but I was like, I don't know enough. Like feel like I'm just going to be wasting time, trying to
Mm-hmm.
kill this deer. Now I feel like, okay, I've seen you enough. I've watched you enough. I've gotten enough pieces of the intel, right? Now I feel like I can actually do something about it,
Mm-hmm.
possibly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever I was reading your story, it was a little bit of, not completely parallel, but there was a lot of things I could as I was reading it, I could take from it. And so
Mm-hmm.
when did you first learn of this deer?
So this deer, it would have been the end of 2020.
Wow. Okay. So
So
4 years.
yeah, so coming, I guess a little bit of a backstory. Coming into 2020 of that hunting season, I ended up shooting the biggest buck I ever shot. He's over there.
Nice.
And coming off of that, that was same day, October 28th. I That's my favorite, one of my favorite days because I shot four deer either the 27th or 28th. But anyway,
Nice.
so coming out of 2020, I was on a high shooting that deer, and what was going through my mind was I experienced more hunting pressure than I've ever experienced coming into 2020. Everybody was out in the woods, right?
Mhm.
Because of COVID. And I was like, okay, well, I think I got lucky. And if I want to keep doing this, I need to have a lot of different spot areas that I can potentially burn, 90% of those and still feel confident hunting 10%. So that kind of started my mind and my thinking process. Okay, well, I'm gonna go on. It was on X at the time, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna look for similar areas to what I've been hunting, and I'm going to devote all my off season here and get out in the woods as much as I can because 2020 came and we were stuck at home,
Mhm.
right? And so I ended up probably scouting. Um, at least 4 days, if not 5 days, during that would have been December, January, February, March, through that spring season. So I was doing a lot. You can ask my wife. I was completely insane, crazy. I got the bug. I got the itch. I was addicted, right? So anyway, I found this area. I got in there and I immediately knew like this is the stuff I love to hunt. Like it was just picture perfect to me. I'm always about like the experience, and part of that, right, is the places I hunt. And you always heard the phrase like, don't hunt where you want to hunt, hunt where the deer are. And it just so happened that this place had both. And those places automatically just like it's just magic, right?
Mhm.
So I was confident in it and I knew the deer were there and I felt good. I felt home there, right?
Mhm.
All right, so that was 2020. The end it was probably December that I found this area. And we're talking 400 acres ish, 500 acres of the area that I was focusing on.
Mhm.
Um and then going into 2021, I found his shed. Um he was I think it was one of his beds at the time during it would have been right after gun season. So he was bedded up on a rock face almost, and he was looking down into the valley where um, a, one trail comes down and into a creek bottom, and then there was also a creek bottom trail that came up because it was near private land, so they were accessing it that way. And he was perched up right on the top here, so he could look either direction and see those lights, flashlights coming in or whatever. And usually we get a either a southwest or a northwest wind, so he was able to manipulate his bedding on either side of this rock face.
Right. Yeah.
So I found his shed. This was, I was guessing he was probably like a 2.5 or 3.5 year old deer at this point.
Right.
So the areas that I hunt, that's a good deer. Just to be honest,
Yeah.
we get enormous hunting pressure, and to shoot a three and a, it would have been a 3.5 or a 4.5 year old deer at that point. I think he would have been 3.5 the next year. But anyway, to shoot a 3.5 deer, that's a good deer for our area.
Same thing where I live. It's like that. If you find a 3.5-year-old deer, anything better than that's a bonus. But that's kind of like, there's a, if you're talking about percentages, that's like the largest percentage of the pseudo mature deer in our area.
Yeah. I would say probably going into, I'm up to like 20 different spots with 100 different potential stand sites, and I'd say I'm probably going into the season with like, I don't know, let's just say maybe 10 deer that are 3.5 or older, and then of those maybe 2 or 3 are older than that. When you do the math there, they're spread over a lot of acres. So so that was 2021. Found his shed there, and that kind of kicked off. Okay, well, and I found some sign in there that I was really happy with. I saw some stuff in there that kind of ticked the box of like, okay, I'm gonna throw a bunch of cameras up here, and I'm gonna spend some time in here and learn it. And I think that also leads to my successes in the off season. I will take 8, 9, 10 hours, and I will just stay in the same spot, walk the trails. Like I love to do in the winter, look for trails that the deer are walking. At this point, it's just very macro level. I'm just trying to see, okay, how the does, just general deer movement, how they're moving around this area. And the big thing too is the places I hunt, there's not a lot of terrain features. And if you do find terrain features, there's ladder stands, right? They're everywhere. So I rely on the micro terrain features a lot, which means I have to have boots on the ground to find those. The mapping programs nowadays, they're getting a hell of a lot better, and it's great, but at the same time, it's helping people do things that wouldn't normally do those things because they wouldn't get out and put boots on the ground. Right. One of the things I've used a lot in the past, or in the recent past, is the Spartan Forge LiDAR kind of layer, right? Yeah. Because that pops out things that you're talking about, right? There's so many things that I noticed in places that I've hunted in the past that I've never made it to this little section, and I look on LiDAR, and it's like, boom, all of a sudden I see this little like divot where I'm like, oh man, I never knew that little depression was there. And you go there and it's like, boom, here's a bunch of deer sign, right? Because it's like, that unassuming terrain feature that people just don't recognize unless they walk it. That kills bucks right there. That's how I capitalize on those micro terrain features and key in on them all the time. Right. Nice. So going into 2021, I would spend 8, 9 hours at a spot and just kind of walk it general, trying to find deer movement, understand what they're doing, where they're bedding, where the food sources are, the water, where other hunters are accessing potentially, where the pressure is, escape routes. I'm big on escape routes. So once I kind of, walk that maybe in the snow, find some tracks, do some postseason scouting. Usually, like I said, I can find like one or two scrapes that I'm like super happy with, and like I'll hang a camera on those. And most of the time my cameras are hung on travel routes and outside of potential doe bedding areas. And I'll hit north, south, east, west sides of those bedding areas and travel routes around them. Um, because at this point, like I said, I'm looking for general movement, and with that, I can then take all this intel in from my boots on the ground and the trail cameras, and I can say, okay, this is a doe group over here. They're bedding, in this general area. They like to bed in this certain way, in the laurel up against the rocks, or in this little outcropping that the trees fell and the undergrowth came up, right? Um, and then, I can establish those different areas. And then I can, through my winter scouting and whatnot, I can use the connecting trails to those and put cameras on those. And what I do is then is take all that intel in, and I can save. Usually, I don't save the pictures, or I run all my cameras on video so I can
Mhm.
see the direction that they're coming, how they look, like if it's an escape route, are they like, you know, flying by it, or what the general sense of what that deer is doing at that moment and where they're
Right.
going. And so I won't save the doe pictures, but I'll keep in my mind, where they are, and I'll map those on my mapping program. And but the buck pictures, even if, from like I'd even say a year and a half, I'll save those into one folder in this general area, and then I will time or date sort them, and time and date sort them so that I can then see, okay, he was over here at this doe bedding area, he hit this travel camera, and now he's down here, or, just kind of just get a general sense of like where he's going.
Right.
Um, and um, that kind of like lays out like a from a bigger picture, like I said, how they're using the area. So I did a lot of that in 2021. Spent a lot of time in there, 8+ hour days just walking it. And then in uh it would have been that hunting season, I went in, I had some good intel, and this would have been the first year hunting it, which I never really I never really give 100% during hunting season to a spot that I just find. Just because I have other spots that I've known for years prior. So I
Right, but
hunted it a
you
little
sit them just
bit.
to see what happens. So you have some like real like
Yep.
butt in the seat intel for like how are they
Yep.
absolutely moving through here? Is it turn on at a
Yep.
certain time of year? Yeah, totally. I
Yep.
get that.
Yeah, so I went in there and I hunted 2021 on some certain wins and some certain spots that I felt confident in, but I never got anything that was like the gotcha moment, right?
Right.
And
But
so
this deer was on your radar at that point though, right?
at that point, yeah. So
Yeah.
like I said, I usually go into the hunting season with, I try to have at least like 5 or 6 deer that I'm after, and it really comes down to also statistically like, okay, there's this area and I know there's two there that I want,
Right.
right? So I'm going to prioritize that because I have a better chance. And at this point in my career, like I'm not I I am after these say 10 deer, but like if any of them walk by, I'm going to,
Right. No, I totally
I'm
get it.
not,
Yeah.
I'm not hunting. I'm not, hunting one specific deer.
I'm typically the same way where it's like, yeah, I steal this from my buddy Josh Prophet. I hunt like a coyote for opportunity. I'm going to sit where I have the
Exactly.
best opportunity for a
Yep.
caliber of deer to walk by that I would like to shoot. On the rare occasion like this year, I focus on a deer.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, side note, once, when you find those like once in a lifetime deer, I think I'm getting to the point where it's like, okay, I might, I might just push my season to just him. But
Yeah.
that's a side note, and I
Right.
think maybe you're kind of in that boat right now, but that
I'm
takes a lot. That takes a
yeah, I'm
lot.
currently in that boat and it's kicking my
Yeah.
butt. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just look at Jake Bush. I mean, he
yeah,
was after that deer for what was it, 3 years, 2 years, 3 years? Um, and he finally got it done. That's great.
yeah, yeah.
But like I'll tell you right now, I'm not there. I'm not at that point. It takes a
Well,
lot.
yeah, it's yeah, we were just talking before we started recording. I think this is hunt 18 for me at
Hmm.
this point, you know, and then if we run it through, you know, the end of the trip that I'm on here, it'll be another 7, so it'll be 25 days. Like, you know, just and I mean, I'm a working guy like everybody else, you know what I mean? So it's
Hmm.
not like all I do is hunt. You know, I'm figuring out ways to make it work, you know, and get out as
Right.
much as I can. And then, you know,
Yeah.
I'll hunt gun season if I have to with a bow. So I'll hunt some days in that too. So it's like I'll be over 30 some days
Yeah.
easy if I run it all the way out. But
Yeah.
anyway, back to this buck. So
Yeah.
you knew of him, you have spots, you know, that
Yep.
you're going to set up like, hey, high percentage sits, you know, where there's a couple deer in the area that I'd be willing to kill or I have interest in killing. And then you'll take a flyer on some newer spots that maybe you don't know quite as much about because you just need to get some seat time in to kind of see things for real.
Yep, and that was this spot on 2021. So I sat it a couple times, didn't really, make anything of it. I ended up shooting a deer at one of my other spots. And so 2022 came around, and I checked my cameras, and I had him hit one of these scrapes that I found in 2021 that I was like, okay, I like this. It was a laurel scrape. Um, and it was, it's near doe bedding. It's between it's well, it's closer to what ultimately was his security bedding, but it was nearby doe bedding also. So I think he was using that to kind of mark his territory of like, this is my area, these are my does. Like, if you want to come challenge me, right? Um, so I had a camera on that 2021, and I checked it 2022, and for 3 or 4 days, late October, which is what I think he was doing. He knew these does were coming in at that time, and I think he was ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
3 to 4 days, late October, he would hit this scrape in. So um, he would come from the north to the south and hit that scrape in the morning, and then on in the evening he would come from the south to the north and hit that scrape in the evening. And he would do that for 3 or 4 days
Hmm.
really consistently. And to this point, I didn't see a deer do what he did that consistently. Um,
Yeah, that's some serious consistency there.
and it was almost like, oh, this is great. But maybe it was just a one-off thing. I
Right. When they
wasn't
get that
putting,
consistent, you're almost like, what's the catch?
yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, well, I I've like I said, I've never seen that happen in a mountain deer scenario before. And it was like, oh, this is great though. Like, okay, I'm gonna be ready for him next year. And so I mapped, like I said, I took time, and I kind of mapped that out, of how he was moving and what the wind would be and how I could access it. But I also, during the 2022 spring season, I went in right after the 2021 season, so it would have been December 2021. I went into where he was going down south into what potentially would have been what I was thinking. He was bedding in this general area where there was thicker cover. It was rocky. It was up on top of a little knoll, so he had the elevation advantage. And the shoots, the like forget what it's called, but just it was really thick. The
Mm-hmm.
shoots were coming up because there weren't any like overhead cover. rocky. So I went in there and I found a couple beds that he was utilizing and moving around this little knoll as the wind shifted. And, to that point, I was probably 4 years into my hunting career because I consider myself a late onset hunter. I only started hunting really when I got out of college at 24, 25.
Right.
So I kind of saw, I was listening to your podcast, Bo's podcast, listening to all those guys and talk about, and Greg talking about bedding, hunting beds and stuff. So I was like, okay, well, this kind of looks right. Like, I think this is kind of this is the scenario I'm playing out in my mind. Okay, this is it. This is where he's bedding. So that would have been, going into 2022. 2022, I was set up and I was ready to hunt him late October, and he ended up disappearing on the other cameras that I had around, kind of watching his movement. He ended up disappearing. It would have been like the summertime frame of 2022, and it would have been probably late July, August, and September. He completely disappeared. I thought maybe he got, I don't know, maybe because there's a lot of coyotes running around where this spot is. I thought, and I'm talking like packs.
Right.
And so I thought maybe he died. So I didn't see him through 3-4 months going into October. And at that point, I had my eyes set, on some other spots that had a little bit more statistical advantage for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't, I hunted there a little bit, but I didn't, like I said, I didn't see him through season.
Right.
So I thought he was gone, and it happens, either another hunter gets him or whatever, what have you. And I didn't think too much of it because at that point, like I said, I'm not targeting one specific deer. So that was 2022. And then I leave my cameras where they are because I like gathering that year after year intel. And 2023, spring of 2023, yeah, 2022, he disappeared. Spring of 2023, I still didn't see him. And then there was some other bucks that showed up on camera, so I was still interested in this spot. I actually didn't find any intel of him again until it would have been spring of this year. So all of 2023, I didn't hunt there.
So you had no intel of him in 23 at all?
Nope.
Wow, that's kind of wild.
Yep. Well, no. I'm sorry. I didn't have intel of him 2022 at all.
Oh, okay.
And then 2023, I left my cameras up. And so what I do is before season, I'll go around and change batteries.
Mm-hmm.
And pull the cards, and I didn't get him all throughout the summer. And then, so like I said, I hunted a different spots for 2023, but I didn't get him all through summer of 2020, 2023. And then after the 2023 season, I went back in and he showed up on camera the beginning of October out of nowhere. I know there was some there was private land logging that was happening at that time that I put together just recently. And I don't know if that changed his pattern.
Disrupted just like the commotion in the general area or whatever made him just move. Yeah, that's interesting.
There was also some burns that happened during that time. on the
Okay.
game lands.
Hmm.
There was a lot going on during that like 2022,
Into the
beginning of
summer of 2020.
2022, and then
Yeah.
end of 2023 that was happening that
Yeah. That's interesting.
um might have contributed to the movement or lack of movement that I saw from him. But
Right.
anyway, so 2023, I'm sorry, spring of 2024. So this spring, I checked those cards and I saw him come in, reappear October of the previous season that I wasn't hunting there.
Hmm.
And then he did the same thing the end of October that he did on 2021. So
So
he
two
came
years
in
apart, right? That's 2 years apart.
2 years apart. Yep.
Wow.
2 years apart. He came in late October. He did the same thing for like 3 days, morning, night, morning,
Was it the
night.
same dates
It was so the
or the
first
same week, maybe?
it was definitely the same week. It was like I can't remember which one if it was the 21 season or the 23 season, but it was, that like 24, 25, 26 up to
Right.
like the 30th. It was in that week.
It was a scrape week, essentially,
Pretty
right?
much. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he ended up doing that in the 2023 season, exactly like he did in the 2021 season for like 3 days, morning, night, the same exact scrape tree. And I didn't tell this in my post, but that winter, so 2023, 2024 winter, we had some snow that dumped, and it dumped on this laurel tree that he likes, and it cracked it at the base, and it fell over.
Oh,
I'm,
jeez.
I'm like, no.
Dude, I had a huge rub, like a signpost rub that I've watched it from the tree, a deer hit, right?
Uh-huh.
And it has a huge scrape that's there too. And this is in a spot back toward or back by my
Yeah.
house that I hunt. And I think it was either last year or the year before in the postseason, I went in to grab a camera and check out the area or whatever. And I get there and the same thing happened. Like, I don't think I mean, there wasn't a lot of leaves on it, but it had been hit over the years so often. It was so concaved that I think just the wind snapped it. And I was just like, oh, you're going to be killing me. It's like,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, so
Yeah.
I feel your pain whenever,
Yeah.
when something like that happens. It's like you feel like someone stole money out of your bank account.
Oh, yeah. Your heart sinks. You're like, oh my God, no, like
Yeah,
my
yeah.
life is over.
Yeah, exactly. Excuse me. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I got in there, doing my thing. I love tracking in the snow, and I saw this, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So, I always carry micro paracord line because I like to manipulate scrapes in, like, I'll bend branches down and tie them off.
Mm-hmm.
So I climbed a tree that was next to this scrape, and I tied a line
You gave him
to
a branch.
bring it back up. So it's still hanging on there with this micro paracord line to another tree, and he was hitting it, and I still have deer hitting it.
Nice.
But
see, that's
crit,
such a good
like,
that's such a good use of manipulation there, though, because like sometimes I've made mock scrapes in the past, and I've had them work to a degree to where it's like I'll get deer hitting it. Sometimes they somewhat adopt it, sometimes they don't. Like fully, like they might hit it and check it out, but it's just not as consistent as maybe like a big community scrape that you found somewhere. But stuff like that right there, where it's because that scrape exists because I'm imagining it's probably an intersection of how deer want to travel. They're always kind of passing by it, and it's probably
Yep.
adjacent to doe bedding, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that is a great spot for a scrape, right? And if you just give them the branch, they'll
Yeah.
continue to use it, right? As opposed
Yeah.
to like abandoning that because instead of going, this branch broke, I'm going to make a scrape 10 yards from that here
Yeah.
where there's a branch already available, right? It's like, well, just give them the branch right there. It's
Yeah.
such a good, like, small
Mhm.
manipulation that they don't know the difference. They just know that a branch is there.
Yeah. And yeah, this one it it fell over, but thankfully it was still at a point where it could still get water
Hmm.
and still stay alive. So I tied it off and in winter there, and it was fine all through summer and fall here. And thankfully, it's still hanging on. Hopefully, it
Right.
still hangs on for a little while. But
Right.
um, if I wouldn't have done that, I don't know what would have happened to the story.
Right. Yeah, because that
But
scrape was the key.
it was
It was
it
the
was
linchpin.
key.
Yeah.
It was the gotcha moment. It was the key moment.
Yeah. So I want to go back for a second because as you were talking, I was thinking about that deer disappearing, and that scrape being the linchpin to really how he got killed. It's that gotcha moment that we were talking about. And I wonder if why he left, because if that scrape is dependent on doe bedding, right? And his visibility there is dependent on the scrape, which is dependent on the doe bedding. I wonder if the logging and the burns manipulated the does versus manipulating him, and he just responded to the does kind of changing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
You
it
know,
could very well be. Yeah.
yeah, because it'd be curious to go back. I mean, I know you don't keep the doe pictures, but if you had the intel and to just look to see of the activity of does in the general area during the same time to see if that went up or down. Because
Yeah.
that would probably tell the story, I would imagine.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. Now you have me thinking maybe I got to save all my pictures.
I don't know if you need to go that far, but like just the mental kind of,
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. That could very well be. Yeah.
Yeah. So the scrape becomes the gotcha moment, right? Where he's 2 years apart, he has this, 3 or 4 day window where he gets really, really consistent on that scrape, right? And so when you saw that last year, you had to been like, all right,
This is
earmarking
it.
October, last week of October, these handful of dates on the right winds.
Yep.
I gotta be there, right?
Yep. And I have to say, like, I have a love-hate relationship with cell cameras.
Mhm.
But in this instance, it absolutely was the perfect scenario, and it absolutely helped me kill this deer.
Mhm.
Because I hung a cell camera there, and I was like, I'm not going in there. I'm not going in there at all until I see this happen for the first day.
Yeah, because it was a couple day
Yep.
occurrence.
And I put all my chips into this. I mean, like I said, I wasn't going in there. If this didn't happen, yes, I had a backup rut stand that I knew he also hit a scrape nearby there a few times that I was gonna go and sit late in the rut. But I put all my chips into this spot for him. And I hung a cell camera there, and for this season, I was waiting and waiting and waiting until I saw that happen the first time. So that would have been October 26th was a Sunday. No, October 27th. I don't know. It was a Sunday. And I saw him hit morning and night on that day. The following morning, I wouldn't have a good wind. I would have had a northwest wind. And so I was actually on a different mountain hunting a different deer that I was hunting pretty much all of early October. And so I had a northwest wind in the morning, but midday it was going to switch and do a 180 and come southwest.
Mhm.
Very, very slight southwest. So I saw that. I knew he did what he did prior, and I was like, okay, this is it. This is my moment. Like, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen right now. Because then, I think the wind was gonna switch back overnight to like a west wind or a slight west northwest wind, which wouldn't have been good for how I was gonna access it and set up,
Right.
and for where I thought he was at that moment. So, like I said, I was on a different mountain, so I got down probably, it was going to switch, I think, at like 12:30, So I got down where I was hunting, and I drove 45 minutes to his where he was. I started walking up on a northwest wind, and then I was gonna J hook into him. So when I got up to where I was about to start the J hook, it was still a northwest wind, and I waited until I started seeing that movement start to switch. So I gave it like 25 minutes or so, 30 minutes till it was a little bit more steady. And then I slowly started making my J hook in to him. At this point, he would have been perched up south, which I'm hoping that he was on the south side of this little knoll yet because of the wind direction, and that I could time it just right, that I could get in there before he potentially got up and kind of moseyed around because the wind was switching. So a lot was like, I had to line up absolutely perfect the way I was thinking about this. So when I started my J hook in, it took me about 2 hours to go. Well, I started it, but once I got within like 200 yards of him, it took me like 2 hours to go that distance and get up into my tree because, I mean, as everybody knows, it's super dry out there. The leaves are like, it was thunderous,
I mean, I'm hearing deer last night. It's like I was hearing deer from 200 yards away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like, it's that loud.
Yep. Yeah. So I was just heel to toe. And, I was trying to be as quiet as I possibly could because in that moment, it was all I had, but I had to believe in it. And I had to do everything I possibly could to be what I needed to be in that moment. And that was just slow everything down and be as quiet as I could getting in there. And to this point, I've never, I've always, once I'm certain, so close to my stand, I get, quiet and, just go slower than I normal walking pace to my stand. Right. But, this time I was almost like I was still hunting, into this tree. So I got there, climbed the tree, wind was good. But where I picked the tree that I want to ambush at, right? When whatever deer gets into my, quote unquote kill zone, right? Usually that wind turns to favor him.
Yes.
And it's not the wind turns, but it's his movement and his pattern of movement. His approach turns such that now it's favoring him. So I needed that slight southwest wind, but when he got to his scrape tree, it would have been redlining there. Like I would have probably been caught. And that leads maybe into, the story a little bit, but so I got up in the tree. It was probably around like at that point 2:30, 3 o'clock, and well, no, it was probably closer to 2:30. And then nothing really, it was about, I think 4:48 was the last time I checked the time on my phone. And then it was literally like 10 minutes after that, I'm watching the knoll area where I think he is. And it was like textbook. I just see the antlers pop up. I'm like, no way. I'm like starting to,
right.
Right. I'm like, oh my God, this is actually playing out in real life. What I thought in my mind would happen. So I'm like, I don't know what to think at this moment, and I'm, shaking, but he's up there and he's got his ears pinned. He's looking down at his, domain, his scrape area. Right. And
he's just giving a good check before he walks in.
Yeah. And he stood there for just doing, checking it out for at least 20 minutes. It felt like forever. And, I'm thankful for that in a way. I mean, I'm playing the wind, right? It could swirl at any minute, but really it let me calm down. It let me calm down a little bit because, also often, with the rut and that time frame, it happens like that and you have no time to even think.
Yeah.
And so I was thankful that I could, at least calm my nerves a little bit. But it took him like 20 minutes before he started. I, felt comfortable enough to start moseying his way down the knoll that he was on, down through the laurel. And, every so often he would stop, right, and just look through and just, being, extra cautious. And it was probably another like 15 minutes or so before he made it down to the bottom part of this knoll. And there's like four really close together oak trees. And he stopped right on, it would have been the right side of that. So I could see his body in there. And I planned it out in my mind. Okay, when I start to see that little movement there, draw back and I'm going to hold because between that and his scrape tree was probably 10 yards. So when I saw that movement, I was ready for him. And once you know it, he keeps on going past his scrape tree and turns directly towards me. And at that point, I couldn't move because he was out there, he was looking, and then all of a sudden, he does he starts looking up and he does like one of these things, right? He's like, he sees something.
I hate that.
Yeah, he sees something. And I think it also helped because I don't normally climb really, big trees.
Right.
But this was the tree. This was the tree. And that's a big thing. It's like your equipment has to meet that demand. And I was prior carrying like daisy chains on my sticks or Amsteel rope. But I've actually switched back to buckles because I was finding not only big trees that I needed, but like weird wonky trees.
Mm-hmm.
And that I could never get the sticks tight enough that I felt comfortable climbing. It would, I've had some scary moments with daisy chains, threw those out. Mm-hmm. And I went to some Amsteel type stuff. But the buckles are always the ones that I could really cinch down. So I ended up switching back to the buckles because I needed to be able to swing the buckle around the tree to catch it, right?
Yep.
But I was in this big white oak tree, and there was a pine tree that was in back of me, so I think that helped too. But so he was doing the head bob. He thinks he sees something, and at that point, he was like 15, 16 yards away. And he was like ever so slightly quartering away. But it was not a shot that I was ever going to make like prior because what I ended up doing was going through like right here, just on the opposite side of the scap, a little bit below, and it went through one lung, top of the heart, came out the bottom, very low on the opposite side. But so at that point, I knew like I couldn't move. He saw something, and if anything, this was it. I was either gonna make the shot or I wasn't gonna make the shot.
Right.
And that was a big, a big thing in my mind is, I never want to take a shot that I'm not comfortable with. But I read, somewhere about, visualizing your shot, visualizing the path that it would take through the vitals if you were to enter, here, where it would come out. So, this is all going through my mind. And at this point, like I felt confident in that path. And I felt confident in my setup too. Um, Ever since, I haven't switched what I've been, my equipment for a couple of years now, and I haven't lost a deer since. And I just went, at that moment, I felt confident in everything, and I felt confident in taking that shot. And because he was so close, um, I felt relaxed in that moment. I felt
Right.
good in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things you mentioned there. One was confident in the setup, like in the area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the old saying of if you don't think you can kill there, then what are you doing there? You
Mm-hmm.
know. And so, and then confidence in your gear, like where you shot that deer is exactly where I shot that deer in Kansas last year.
Oh, did you? Oh,
Same
really?
spot. Yeah.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
it's it he was quartering to just a little bit, and I stuck it like where our collarbone would be, out the
Yep.
opposite side shoulder.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and what you were saying is true. It's like, a lot of people, it's easy when they're broadside, right? It's like put the pin on it and let it go, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's different whenever they're coming in angled, right? Because you're not so much, you shouldn't be looking at where you're going to put your pin necessarily. Like, I mean, you need to as you're aiming, but you should be thinking about the exit, not the entrance, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And so, and that's the thing I think a lot of people in the moment, and rightly so, man, especially if you have a target deer come in, sometimes you lose your marbles just a little bit, right? But if you can remember, especially when they're angling, where you want that arrow to exit, usually
Yep.
your pin spot is much better situated to have a better outcome.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Yep. Um,
So you let
so
the arrow go, you hit him, like you got to be feeling good, right? Or did you have that every deer hunter
no,
who shoots their target, but as soon as you let it go, doesn't matter how good the shot is, you're like, oh my god, did I kill him? Like, or is he gonna like
well, I mean, there's always that split moment of like, oh my
yeah,
God, please go down, right?
right,
But I the shot went where I wanted it to go, and he ran 30 yards and piled up in the thick laurel. And I mean, it was over within 10, 15 seconds. I mean, it was,
wow,
I couldn't have asked for a situation. I mean, he
right,
expired quickly.
right.
I was
What
thankful
was
for
your
that.
what was your initial thought? Like you just arrowed
I
this
was
deer.
like, I was just like, did that really just happen? Like, I mean, I was just speechless because like, even, I, 4 years, everything that had to have happened over the past 4 years boiled down into that 1 second
Mm-hmm.
where he was looking at me and I was looking at him. And it was just pure like prey predator
Mm-hmm.
interaction. Like we knew each other was there. This is it. This is the moment.
Yeah,
I will never forget looking into that deer's eyes.
yeah.
I it, until you experience that, or until like you fully comprehend that, like there's no words that I can say to describe that. It's
Right.
all it's all in here,
Yeah.
right? And
Especially when you know him as well as you did, right? Like that's
yeah,
the other kind of kicker, right? Because deer I killed last year, we had that moment where he knew I was there, like and you saw it like when he turned, where he was like, you could tell he knew the jig was up.
yeah, yep,
He was like, yeah, I just messed up,
yeah, yep,
and but I didn't know that deer but for a day because I glassed him and went and killed him, right? But whenever you have that, you know,
mm-hmm.
almost relationship where you expect to see this deer year over year, you're learning him, right? It's a little bit different
It's
because you start to know him.
yeah, it's hard. I know walking up to him, I was just like,
Like you're never going to see another picture of him, right? There's a part of
yeah,
you, I'm sure, that's like, the
yeah.
chase, like that is over now, and there's a little sadness there because of it.
Yeah, it was weird because, like, you're always so, pumped and so happy. But, like, it was weird because I was walking up to him and I just kind of was, like, somber
Mm-hmm.
almost. Like, I was just like, wow. Like, like I said, just somber. It was like this moment of, like, elation, but yet just kind of sadness because it's like, you know, I've, I've had, 4 years of relationship, you know, trying to understand this deer, trying to be his friend, right? Trying to be him, really,
Mm-hmm.
and just understand like what his personality and, you know, who he was. And, you know, it's, it's, I'm still trying to find the right words to describe it, but all I can say is just it was a very like happy, somber moment. And like, I mean, I was so excited, but like it really makes you I know I've always actually I've always struggled with my religion,
Mm-hmm.
spirituality and stuff like that. And you know, I've always said I believed in God, right? But I've never really, I don't think, said like I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working through that with my wife. We're going, you know, started going to church and whatnot. But this is the first moment in my life where God put so many things all at once into this season. And then to have this deer, 4 years, everything that had to happen in those 4 years all come down into that one moment. And later I find out when I was butchering him, he was injured at some point, and I couldn't save his right shoulder. So I don't know if he was, I don't know, you know, what happened, but he could have died at some point. And so like just everything that had to happen over 4 years culminating into that one moment, it just really it changed my thinking. It changed my
Mm-hmm.
thinking in both hunting and personally.
Right.
um
I mean, that's awesome, dude. Like there's things that we do in life, whether it's hunting, whether it's jujitsu, or whether it's tiddlywinks, whatever it is that we're passionate about, right?
yeah,
If you let those things and those experiences kind of shape you and unveil things to you, you know, they will unveil them to you at the right times, right?
yeah,
Like
yep,
I'm a believer in, you know, there's no forcing, you know, understanding sooner or
hmm,
growth sooner. Like it all happens at the time that it's supposed to happen, right?
yeah,
And so
because
like so that's awesome, man. Like I love hearing that, how those experiences, you know, are more profound than just, you know, the field tag, which is awesome.
yeah, because I mean, just a little background, like the buck that I was hunting all of early October, mid-October. um you know, I was going through some stuff personally, and you know, I wasn't able to get out at certain times when I would have liked to because of
Mm-hmm.
the wind and whatnot. But the buck that I was hunting showed up 3 days, 2 or 3 days, early October. Same kind of deal as this buck. Early October, hit scrapes in the daylight. I wasn't able to be there, right? So I went in and hunted him. He liked mornings, but I went in and hunted him that next week because we had a good cold front come in. Hunted mornings, got up 2:30, 3 a.m. every single morning for 4 or 5 days, and then went into work. And he didn't show up. We ended up going to a family function, right? And
Mm-hmm.
or no, we went to Knoebels, and he showed up that morning at 9:30. I'm like, you're kidding me. I'm like, okay, well, again next week, all right, I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna hunt him because I think he's coming in at, you know, every 4 or 5 days he's coming in and he's walking this it's like a rock, a vein of rocks with some laurel, but the doe, it's to the where the doe are going. And so I think he was coming in checking those doe so often. But
Mm-hmm.
I hunted him in the next week, and then we had a family function, and I didn't hunt. And guess what? He showed up that time, and like, I mean, at this point, like, I'm hunting this deer. He's a 4.5-year-old deer for sure, and like, I'm accessing it with the correct wind. Like, there's no way. Like, I feel 100% confident in how I'm doing things, and
Right.
I'm not influencing him, but he every single time he he would show up when I wasn't there. And to your point, you know, there's always a time for everything. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I put that Bible quote, you know, in my post. And there's a time for everything under heaven, right? And if I would have shot that deer, I would have never had this opportunity on this deer. Mm-hmm. So it just, it just keeps adding that, I'm a very statistical, mathematical, I'm an engineer for trade. So I am very much, numbers are everything to me. That's how I hunt. I have a lot of different spots and I boil it down statistically to, right. And I needed God to show me like 30 things all at once and to get it through
that are unlikely to happen all at once.
To get it through my thick skull that he's there and he is the one telling the story, right? And it just reiterates to me like I wasn't able to capitalize on this deer early season because he had a bigger plan. And his plan was to show me this deer after 4 years and give me all the moments leading up to that and that exact moment. And, it has led to more connections and more, friends that have come into my life since then because I shot this deer and more opportunity also. Mm-hmm. And it's like, none of this would have ever happened if he didn't orchestrate what he did for me.
Right.
And it's just,
that's awesome, man.
When you get, I did my first podcast. It would have been a week ago from today. It was like last Friday or something like that. Mm-hmm. And my wife I called my wife after and she's like, well, do you feel like, high or like on a high? Like, are you happy? And like this, I'm like, because who I did it with was, Mitchell, Shirk from, the PA Woodsman.
Yep.
And he's actually close by too.
Oh, nice.
And he's very much into he goes to church, godly man, right? And we ended up having a conversation and about, God afterwards and, where he was in his life in the podcast and whatnot. And stuff like that would have never happened if all these other things didn't line up exactly. And it's like,
and you being a math guy. Yeah.
You're better off getting struck by lightning than all this happening. So it's like, you just have to believe. It's crazy. Anyway, that's a awesome, long-winded story, but
no, man, I love it, man. I love it whenever people, however it comes to them, that they have those moments of clarity in their life. You know what I mean? Like, I wish that for everybody, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. 'Cause there's a peace that you get with it. That
100%.
You just don't get anywhere else, man.
100%.
But speaking of, man, I know you guys are trying to get to church this morning, and I don't want to keep you too long.
Yeah.
Be honest, I could use some heat in the truck right now, and I want to turn it on.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna let you get going.
Okay.
Before I do that, though, man, let people know where they can find out more about you, like on Instagram, where they can follow you if they want to keep up with things that you have going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the only thing I have is Instagram, which is Cody.Redinger. So just my name on Instagram, and that's where I have my stuff. I post, photos and whatnot, but, that's as far as I get for right now.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah,
I'm super stoked for you and super stoked that, beyond the field tag, that all the other things, all the other dots are connecting for you, man. I love hearing that.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Osseo Gear, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.